welcome to our webinar. I hope you can hear me. Tyler, can you hear me? Great. My name is Veronica, and I'm a marketing specialist at Extract.ai, and I'll be your host today. In the next 30 minutes, we're going to show you how to automate metadata in SharePoint. We'll take invoices as an example. So we'll start by giving you a bit of context and then build and walk you through a case of automation. And we'll have room at the end for Q&A for all your questions. We have with us today a very special guest who will lead us through the technical part. It's a Power Automate expert, Tyler Wasson. Tyler is an independent contractor who specializes in the Microsoft Power Platform, covering Power BI, Power Automate, and Power Apps. His career spans over 20 years in the private sector, working in retail, manufacturing, and informational technology. Tyler, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Veronica. Thanks for that introduction. So yeah, I've been working with the Microsoft Power Platform since the inception of Power BI in 2015. 2 years ago, I started my own IT consulting company called Waytech Solutions that focuses on all areas of the Power Platform. I also have my own blog and YouTube channel called TWA Tech that provide how-to posts and videos on the Power Platform. And it's a real pleasure being able to speak with everyone today.
It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
So we'll just tell you what a typical workflow for our clients usually looks like. So they will take an invoice, a PDF document, and then upload it to SharePoint. And after that, they will have to go through each part of the invoice to try and find, as you can see here on this recording, to try and find all the relevant data to populate the SharePoint library fields. This has to be done for every single document, and you have to go through them one by one. So that's a lot of manual work, as you can imagine, and it can get quite messy. It's a process that kind of screams for automation. And the good thing is, it's not that difficult to automate. If you use Power platforms like Power Automate and Extract.ai agents, it's actually quite simple. So this is what we're going to show you today. We'll start off by showing you how to customize a process template in the Extract.ai platform. And then the whole process will be kind of like this. Whenever you get a new email with the invoice attached, you can just forward it to Extract.ai platform. And this is when the automation actually starts. Extract.ai platform will process the invoice, meaning it will extract only the data that you specified in the process template, so only the data you want. And then you will get the process data or the extraction back to your email, which gets sorted into a dedicated folder, for example. You will get in the attachment the original file, so the original invoice PDF file, as well as the processed file, which in our case will be JSON file. Once the extraction is in your folder, that will trigger Power Automate to get through the attachment. So first, it will take the PDF file from your email and upload it to the SharePoint folder that you specified. And then in the second step, it will take the JSON file and get the data from the JSON file and then populate the fields in the SharePoint library from that particular invoice. You won't have to fill anything by hand anymore. The whole thing, once we are done with this automation that we're going to show you today, the only thing that you will have to do is just forward the email to the Extract.ai platform. And in a couple of minutes on your SharePoint will be the invoice PDF file with all the data already filled up. So now let's go and build this automation together with Tyler. Okay. I'll start with my part.
Okay.
Okay, so the first thing you want to do is once you're in the Extract AI app or platform, we want to go under create a new template. And in this case, so today we will be creating a custom template. You can see here, you have a lot of pre-made templates already. But today, for this purpose, we're just going to create a new one. You can name it whatever you want. I will name it. So here you have a bunch of steps. For today, we're only going to need the first step. And here are the fields that you want to be populated in the SharePoint. It's important to know that you want them to be spelled the same as they will be in SharePoint and in your Power Automate. So you have that consistency and Power Automate doesn't get confused. So the first thing I want is invoice number. And then purchase order number. Let's say supplier company name. Supplier company address. And then sold or price excluding VAT. I think everyone on the Zoom call can tell I have a mechanical keyboard. It's pretty loud, so. I'm surprised I haven't gotten any complaints from my coworkers. As you can see, I have misspelled here, so I'll just make sure to check out everything is spelled the same. You have it on your SharePoint. So here I'll click create. So once we have that template created,
Just to clarify, so that information that you provided, that's exactly what it's going to extract.
Yes, yes. And also, we now in this next step, we will upload a document. So you can take any invoice you want. I'll take, for example, this one. And then we need the JSON file. We need the JSON file for Power Automate. You will only have to do this once. And the reason why we need the JSON file is because we have to give Power Automate. So you can see here, it's important that it's in JSON format. We need to give Power. Can you see the JSON file?
No.
Here? Okay, just a second, because I really want to show you this. Okay, how about now?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So why we need JSON file is because we want to give Power Automate an example of exactly what to extract under which column. So for example, you can see here, we defined we want the invoice number. So Power Automate will, in the step when he puts the metadata into SharePoint, know that it has to take this metadata in this quotes and put it under invoice number. And so it goes the same for all of this here. That's why the spelling is important, because Power Automate is kind of a grammar Nazi. So I will send this to Tyler, and now he will go over exactly step by step how to create the flow.
Thank you, Veronica. Share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, perfect.
Great. So first thing is, I want to go over the SharePoint site. So we have our basic document library in SharePoint. This is the standard fields that normally come with it. So this is our actual invoices that we'll be saving into the document library, and they're filed under the name. Then we've added multiple columns to the library. So as Veronica identified at the beginning of the session, so we have our invoice number, purchase order number, supplier name, address, total price excluding tax, and the total price plus tax. So this is the information that the Extract AI service is pulling from the invoice and sending it to us in a JSON file. So these last three columns here are number or currency columns in SharePoint. And we have a summation set up for them, so they have totals. So although we could take the total price plus taxes from the extraction, in this case, we're not. We're actually going to be doing a calculation. And due to just the limitations of SharePoint, you're not able to do a summation with a calculated column. So you can have calculated columns in SharePoint. So we could technically set it up, but then we wouldn't be able to do the summation. So we're actually going to be doing that part within the Power Automate. So let's start with our flow. So with every flow, we start with a trigger. And our trigger here is going to be when an email arrives in our Outlook inbox. So I already have a rule set up so that when I receive an email from the Extract AI service, it gets moved to a specific folder in an Outlook. So with this trigger, I have it set up to be identify the folder in Outlook. So when the email is sent there, this will initiate the Power Automate flow. And then our first action after the trigger is a initialize variable action. So we're going to be creating a variable here. We're naming it PDF file ID. It's an integer, and we're not providing a value at this time. So when we create a new record in SharePoint document library, we don't really think of it as a record, but these are all just individual records, like in a database. So each one has a specific ID. So we're going to need that information so that when it comes time to save our metadata to our document library, we know exactly which row to save it to. Next, we have what's called an apply to each action. This is, think of it as like a repeat loop. So it would iterate through everything that you have from within your apply to each action. And with every, or most every action in Power Automate, we provide the information through either what's called dynamic content or an expression. Sometimes or both. So in this case, we're looking for all the attachments that came from our email. And that's what we have here. So it's dynamically, we'll look through that dynamically. And then within our apply to each action, we have a condition. So it's a true false condition. And what we're doing here is of all the attachments, we're going to identify which attachment name ends with .pdf. And to do that, we select our first item here, which is going to be our name of our attachment. So under the when a new email arrives action, we want to look for the attachment name. We want it to end with, and then .pdf. And so if it's true, if we've identified our PDF file, which is going to be our invoice, we're going to save it into our SharePoint document library. So, and to do that, we could use what's called a create file in SharePoint action. We're going to provide the site address. We're going to use the folder path of the document library. And we want to provide the file name from the attachment. So same as before, we look up the attachment name, and then under file content, we want to provide the attachment content. Even though it says content bytes, it's actually the file content. So this saves our file into the document library, which would save it right here. And now that we've saved it, we can now get the file ID or the record ID in here to save it into our variable. So to do that, we're going to do what's called a set variable action, which essentially will update the value of it. So we select our variable name. We only have the one, which is our PDF file ID. And then for the value, we're going to go to our dynamic content, look for our create file action, and select body item ID. So that concludes our first apply to each action. So now we've received our email, we've saved the invoice file to our SharePoint document library. Now we want to do the same thing, but this time looking for the JSON file. And to do that, we're going to do another apply to each, and we'll be looking through our email attachments.
Tyler, one question.
Sure,
Why
yeah.
can't we put both of them in the same apply to each loop? Like, why do there have to be two apply to each loops?
Yeah, good question. So initially that's what we did, but essentially it would, I struggle with getting it to resolve properly. It would either finish on one or the other, and then it would essentially end the
So
action.
it failed the flow?
Yeah, it failed the flow each time.
Okay.
So in kind of like re-engineering it, it made more sense to do it separately. And this way, once it completes, it will essentially iterate again. And so we were able to get a successful, a successful completion. So after going through the attachments, we want to do another condition. And this time we're going to be looking for the name, the attachment name that ends with .json this time. So as you had mentioned earlier in the beginning of the webinar, you had mentioned that I would get the JSON, and the first thing I need to do with that. So we're going to do two data operations. The first is a compose action, and in this compose action, we're going to be using an expression using the function called base64 to string. So base64 is essentially what the format of the JSON file that would be essentially receiving in via email. And we're going to be converting that. So essentially it's binary data. So we need to convert that to a string. And so there's a function within Power Automate called base64 to string. And we're using the content, the items content, which we could technically get under our when the email arrives, and look for the attachment content here. So that's our first data operation. Our next is parse JSON data operation. And this is essentially breaking up our JSON file into specific categories or columns, and that we can use so that we can populate specifically into our document library. So we're going to grab our output from our compose action here. So here we would select our output from compose. So this is already pre-populated. So what we would do, normally there'd be nothing here. We would select use a sample payload to generate our JSON. So the JSON that you showed us earlier in the webinar, we can take that and save it or paste it into here, and then select done, and that'll generate a schema based on this information. So here you can see that we have all strings, and it's going to separate that information so that we can save it individually. So lastly, now that we've received our JSON, we've converted it from base64 to string, we've parsed it. Now we can update our SharePoint document library. So we want to use an update file property in SharePoint action. And to do that, we provide our SharePoint site address, our document library name. And now we're going to identify which record in the document library. And to do this, we're going to provide our variable. So here we will go to dynamic content, look for variables, and provide our PDF file ID variable. And then when we select our site address here, it would identify all the columns that we can populate. So we don't need to do them all. So I'll remove the ones that we don't need. And now we can focus on our individual columns. So here we have our invoice number, PO number, etc. And then we would provide our dynamic content coming from our parse JSON action. So we have our invoice number here. So it's body invoice number, body PO number, all the way down to body total VAT. So we would just do that for each individual column. And then the last column, as I said, we were doing a calculation. So we're doing an addition action, or I'm sorry, addition function. So here we have our these are our two columns. So we're taking, or not columns, so actually this is the body. So it's the information that we're receiving from our JSON. So these two values here, and then we're converting them to a float, which is essentially a data type that allows for decimal places. And then coalesce function here, which will allow us to perform this function even if the value is 0 or null. So we're doing that to each of these two values, and then that'll perform that calculation for us. And then that's it. So did you want to give it a try? Give it a
Yes.
test?
Let's go.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
Okay, I'm gonna share my screen now.
Okay.
You have to stop sharing, just so.
Sorry.
There we go. This one. Okay, so as you can see, here is the process template we created. And now the only thing that we have to do is copy this unique identifier. So copy this email connector. And right here, I have, let's say, an invoice that we got from our supplier or somebody else. And then all you have to do is just forward that invoice that you got into this unique email connector. It's also really good that then it becomes the name of that email connector gets saved as the process template name. And from then on, you can always just search it. You don't have to each and every single time just copy paste it. So here we'll send it. And another really good thing that is worth mentioning is when you create a template or an integration in Extract AI platform, it's automatically set so that you get the process data sent back to your email. But in this case, I wanted Tyler to get the email, so I put his email because it's on his SharePoint, and you can do that. So even though you created a template, it can go to your coworker or whoever you want to get that process data. So let's see if that works.
Can we automate that email part?
What do you mean?
Just that part that you're doing there, is that something that could be automated?
Of sending or forwarding the email?
Yeah.
No, not at the moment. So once this whole thing is done, the only thing that you will still have to do is forward the email. But yeah, that's it.
Okay.
So now let's look at the results.
Did you want me to share my screen?
Yes, please.
So this is the screen from Power Automate that shows the history of our every time it runs. So I refresh it here. So it just ran 1 minute ago. It was a success. So if we come here, we should see a new record. So this is
Oh, wow.
a record that was just created. So this was the invoice name, the invoice number, and information. And then, so it provided this information and the calculation was adding these two together, which it looks right.
Yeah,
And then you
that
notice the
looks
sum was updated as well.
that looks great.
Yeah, awesome. Very good.
Mm. Tyler, can you go back and show the successes and failures just a little
Oh,
bit?
sure. Oh, my bad.
No, no,
Right.
the flows. Yeah,
Right.
so I just want to say that all the successes were done by Tyler and all the failures were done by me not listening to Tyler.
Oh, you mean these ones?
Yeah, I mean these ones. So instead of sending a PDF, like when we're testing the flow to see if it works, I would send a JPEG for some reason. And Tyler, and we were both wondering what happened. So it's me. You can see that human error is more, I mean, it's
It
usually
happens.
the flow works. It's the human error that doesn't. Okay.
Yeah, but once, like you said, like once we set up the parse JSON, that schema, and assuming that everything is, like you said, accurate for what you're sending. I mean, once you set it up, the template and everything should just work. Um, so, and as you can see after that, it's not an issue. So, and then we can just go in really quick and see the result. So you can see the individual actions, checkboxes. So if you look here at the first apply to each, so there's two iterations. So there was only two attachments in the email. So first one was a fail. The second one, it was a success.
Mm.
And then on the second apply to each, so the first attachment was our JSON file. And you can see here, they were all successful. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. It goes through each one and yeah, identifies it. Okay, so now we're moving on to the Q&A part. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen again.
okay.
I saw there were some questions already flying in as we were talking. So let me read it. You can see my screen, correct? I mean, it's very important data there. Is this only limited to invoices? So no, this is not only limited to invoices. In our previous webinar, actually, we did this for contracts. So it can be done for a variety of documents, for example, purchase orders or order confirmations or contracts like we did in our previous video. Another question is, what if the same supplier resends the invoice because of some mistake? Do I have to go through the whole process again? No, this is the good thing about it. Once you set up this process, it's done. So once you create the process template, that's it. You can use this process template for all your invoices. It doesn't matter if it's a different invoice sent by the same supplier or if it's a different supplier with a different invoice. So, and also the Power Automate flow will work with all of them.
Yeah, and one other thing, if for instance it was the wrong information or the wrong invoice or something that was improperly sent, you could just delete the line item on your SharePoint in your document library as well. So
yeah, oh yeah, that's nice because the SharePoint document library is always customizable.
Yeah, and then the other thing too is you can also edit the the values in there manually if you had to go back and do that as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Next question is, can we check the invoices against purchase orders? Yes, we actually can. So what you can do is when you're setting up your process template, you can instruct the AI agent or set it up in a way so if there is something with the template, AI agents check it. So like items, quantities, dates, or prices, for example, against POs. And if there is a mismatch, then it alerts the supplier. And once the supplier gives back the feedback, it automatically processes the reply. So yeah, just another.
Very cool.
Yeah, there's another question. Sorry, because most of them came in the chat and some came in the. Okay, is there a security loop preventing from submitting a data set or PDF twice? Many thanks. So I'll let this one from answer one of our specialist programmers. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So maybe I can take this one. Hi there, Tom here. Hey Veronica, Tyler, great job. Love it.
Thank you.
So here, basically, it goes in line with what Veronica already told. So we can set up additional steps in the workflow in Extract AI, which allows to check if data is repeating, and it can stop the flow there before sending that to SharePoint. So we are preparing more on this topic in the coming webinars. So happy to expand on this one in the coming episodes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So that's it with the questions. As you can see, there's a lot that can be done. Today, we only focused on invoices, but we'll have more webinars coming. So with all type and kinds of complex workflows. So make sure you stick around for those. Here is a free link to the trial. If anyone wants to give it a try, give it a go to see exactly how it works. This webinar will be available we'll put it on YouTube. So it will be on our YouTube channel and also on Tyler's YouTube channel, where you can watch it again or share it with your colleagues. And we'll send you an email after this is done sometime next week with the zip file of the automation that Tyler did and some additional info linked to the webinar, for example. So you will have everything at the same place if you want to rewatch it or, do the flow. So thank you again for joining us. Tyler, thank you so much for being our guest again.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. So that's it for today, and I'll see you next time. Bye.